We are entering the panel zone. Hello, delegates. Hello, panel. It is so good to see you. Finally, we get to talk to each other. Do not be shy. I know you're already on the platform, delegates. You're already talking to each other. The guests are about to introduce themselves on our panel, and you can talk to them immediately. I'm not going to put you right at the end in the last 5 minutes. We're going to have that interactive conversation because we're virtual and we can do anything. So this panel is about reflections on change, roadmaps to recovery, and there's some excellent people who are about to speak to you, speak to each other. Hello, Suphachai. Welcome. Tell everybody who you are. What do we need to know about you? Hello, Suphachai. There was silence.
I can't hear
you don't know about me
sorry.
already. Hello, Suphachai. Welcome to the virtual panel. Welcome to Virtual Life. Tell everybody who you are. Do your own introduction will be fantastic because it will be your own introduction. Go ahead.
Is that for me?
Yes, that's for you. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Just the sound here is very low. Anyway, thank you, Femi. And I would like to take this opportunity to thanks UN Global Compact and under the leadership of Milesi that you have conduct such a summit in a timely basis. Again, the situations in the case of Thailand, we are actually working a lot with the among ourselves. Can you hear me?
Yes, there's a little bit of background noise going on there, Suphachai. It happens sometimes because we've got a panelist behind the scenes and we're trying to sort out her audio. Her name is Clara. You're hearing Clara's voice in the background. We are going to ask the tech team and the audio team, bring Clara's audio down, and then we won't hear it and we won't have her interrupting us. Fingers crossed.
Yes, I can hear you.
Fingers crossed. All right, Mr. Suphachai, it was great to meet you. I will come back to you. Karmany, will you introduce yourself? Give us your introduction. Tell the world who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Femi. Thank you so much. It's a really honor to be on this panel today and to be able to share some of my thoughts and ideas with you. My name is Reddy. I'm from South Africa. I work for a business called Distell, which is a beverage business here in South Africa. And as part of our sustainability journey, call it that, I was elected to be on the YSIP, which is the Young Innovators program that the UN is hosting. So if you haven't heard about it, I urge you to please check out the workshops later on in the agenda and definitely see what these young minds are coming up with. It was really one of the highlights for me this year along sustainability, which I hope to give you more information later on.
Oh, you absolutely will. Thank you, Karmany. And bringing in Philip. Philip, do your own introduction. Tell everybody who you are, why you're important on this panel. Go ahead.
No sé, yeah.
Okay, my name is Philip Jennings. I just wanted to say to everybody, I was actually there in 1999 when Kofi Annan made his speech at Davos. I was there in the year 2000 when this initiative was launched with just 44 companies. I was there in my capacity as a global trade union leader, a post which I held until 2018 at Uni Global Union. My job there was to promote workers' rights, defend human rights, gain collective bargaining rights, fight for equality, locking horns with multinationals, making agreements with multinational companies, but above all, trying to change their behavior. You can imagine I'm something of a veteran. I'm on the board of the Global Compact, but my mandate is coming to an end soon. And I just say I've lived through multiple crises, the debt crisis, the dot-com crisis, the financial crisis, COVID-19 inequalities, and now George Floyd. The conclusion is the economic model is bust and the business model is bust. We as a world must do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. That energy, I can tell, has served you well during your career. So this is what we're going to do, panel and delegates as well. We are in a situation where we have a COVID crisis, and we were also not on track for the SDGs as far as businesses coming up to par and working out what are they going to do? How are they going to get ready for 2030? How are they going to be on that development plan? They're already falling behind. And then we had a global pandemic, and now we could be either in a dire situation or we could be in a situation we have a new opportunity to recover better, stronger, together. That is what I would love to hear about. Let me start with Mr. Suphachai in terms of what you are doing as a business in Asia right now to explain how you're fighting COVID-19. What are you doing?
Thank you, Femi. In fact, for us, first of all, we have to, as a private sector, we have to maintain jobs. I think we have to be. Secondly, we have to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic. Every measures that we wanted to keep our business running, the laying off people would be the last option. That would only add on to the burdens of the public. So keeping the jobs is one of the very first initiatives that we actually have and announce throughout the whole CP group. And this is also the advice that we also give to the government to try to maintain job and the business continuity. We have also initiate the help coming from our strength. For example, we are a food company. We have been supplying the food for all the 90 hospitals that are admitting the COVID victims, for example, and not only to the hospital, to all the doctors and nurses, and also their families members, because they have to stay away from their family members. It's already very tough for them. So we want to find ways to leverage our own strength to actually help all those heroes that are sacrificing themselves and their family to actually fight with the COVID. Secondly, we also promised the public that we will build a mask, called surgical mask factories. And we did that in 5 weeks because we are very keen in terms of building the food factories, and we know how to work on the high standard factory. And especially for the surgical mask factory, that we are donating the whole factory that can produce 3 million masks a month to the hospital.
So, Mr. Suphachai, you sound like
hear
you're
me?
it sounds like you're incredibly proactive. I'm going to share this conversation with your co-panelists. So take a pause for a moment. In the background of our conversation as we were getting ready was Clara. Clara, technology 1, Clara 0, but Clara has triumphed and she's with us right now. Clara, so good to have you. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm sorry because the technology sometimes make these things. Okay. My name is Clara Arpa. I have a little family company in Spain, in the north of Spain, and we design, manufacture, and install field hospitals. So during the last month, we have been working so hard in order to supply some of the needs that have the Spanish government here in Spain and also in other countries around the world.
Philip, I'm just thinking right now, as somebody who cares deeply about trade unions and workers, the workers have been on the front lines, those essential workers. Can you give us a couple of stories about what you know to be true right now in terms of workers and COVID-19? Go ahead.
First of all, we are pleased that the world has woken up and recognized that the people on the front lines of this crisis are the most vulnerable. They are the worst paid very often. They have poor working conditions. And they are in a situation of basically being in work and being in poverty. And therefore, the world has woken up to this. I think the new movement everywhere has taken very in ensuring that people are not left behind in this crisis. There are 150 countries have put pressure on their governments, put pressure on employers to ensure that their protection, so people don't fall destitute. Being the essential voice. Where that voice hasn't been listened to, we have taken to the streets. We have taken. They've fallen in love with their public services again, if ever they ever fell out in love with them in the first place. They've also shown that with dialogue, collective bargaining, and recognising workers' voice, you can come through this crisis in much better shape. We have been the essential voice for those essential workers. Today, there's action taking place worldwide for cleaners and security guards. It's an international day of justice. Without them, we would have been a lot worse off in facing this this crisis.
Karmany, I hear you doing and there's something that I know that I want to tap in and that you've recognised is that the way the world has come together mostly to tackle COVID-19 is not the way the world looks at development at all. Can you pick up on that idea? It's yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. I go back to the first time that I heard about this virus in Wuhan. I was lying in bed, woke up that morning, scrolled through my news feed and heard about just a brief story covering this virus. And before I knew it, it was a global pandemic, and everyone's up in arms and everyone's being mobilized, to fight this dire threat that we're being faced with. And both from an economical perspective, Philip's mentioned mobilizing healthcare workers, different services across the industry to actually go up in arms and fight this battle that we're faced with. I admire the way that business and sector has come together to put aside differences, competition, and profit and loss statements to actually find a place to survive this pandemic that we're facing. And it's redesigning of business models, mobilizing groups within businesses to actually focus on crisis management, or how can we actually help industries like the healthcare, broken healthcare systems, especially in a country like South Africa, really focusing on healthcare and getting supplies to the most vulnerable communities, which is in abundance across the world. And I always wonder, if I look at the moment that I first read about COVID-19, at the time it wasn't even given the name COVID-19, and if I look at the time period it took and the amount of passion that industry put behind fighting this pandemic, I always think we had less than a week to actually mobilize various sectors in South Africa to get behind this. But we've been hearing about SDGs, which are real threats, and we've got such a, in not sufficient time or insufficient time in some cases to actually mobilize ourselves to get ready. Imagine if we had this kind of warning come pre-COVID-19 to get ahead of this and to really start making a difference. So for me, it's a matter of, instead of waiting for this disaster to happen, and we can learn from this, we know we can become an agile society, and COVID-19's proven that to us. And I think more importantly, proven that to governments as well as businesses, that important of having that kind of agile, adaptive mindset when faced with a crisis. And for me, what's important is looking at SDGs. It sounds 2030, sounds far away, but let's use this as an exercise to actually get ourselves mobilized to fighting the real battles that we're going to be faced with in the next 10 years. And COVID-19 is for sure, just the tip of the iceberg for that.
Delegates, watching this, you shouldn't just be watching, you should be engaging and being in this conversation. You are the other panelists that we want to bring in. Our thoughts, just so you know exactly what we're talking about in this panel, is how does business unite, look at what's happened during our global pandemic, and then work together to push forward with the SDGs. We have 10 more years before 2030. How do we take this crisis, and I call it making champagne out of lemons, not even lemonade. We're going to go that extra step and go to champagne, okay? We're not going to let any global pandemic from stopping us from great development. I want to go back to Mr. Suphachai. Mr. Suphachai, you had this list of things that you had done during COVID-19, but let's look ahead and a roadmap for businesses like yours. What can the leadership do? What can a CEO do to make development possible, even though we're still handling a global pandemic? Ideas. You go first.
Thank you, Femi. Again, we should not lose sight of the fact that COVID will, one day goes away. We'll find a way to be able to manage it. And as we are now, okay? And in the bigger picture, there are many other things that are impacting the world economy, such as climate change, waste, pollutions, etc., etc. All these equality issues, the unemployment issues. So those are the issues that we have to not lose sight of. And as a private sector, we have to help ourselves, but also at the same time work with the government. And this is, as we have the saying among the private sector, that a crisis always come with great opportunity. And for this, we can actually transform our business. We can actually really change our culture. And we really will be training our leaders across the organizations to be more innovative, to actually be more sacrificed, and to actually also train even our workforce to look at how can we actually
So
help
Mr. Suphachai,
address the world.
I understand this, and I think this is fantastic. Are you doing it? Do you have the plan? Are you thinking hopeful thoughts? Because we only have 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the questions. We have to make the best out of the situations, and we have to plan. Why we actually we have to look at how we face the crisis and prepare ourselves, such as cutting costs. Okay, at the same time, maintain the job as long as possible. At the same time, don't stop investing. Do not lose confidence. We just have to weather the storm maybe a year or two, and it will be over. So what make the depressions happens, or the Great Depression happens, is because people or the business private sector lose the confidence. So this we have to look at things long term, in the medium term and long terms, and that we plan our business the same as before. We just have to be more cautious on how we actually mobilize our resources.
Okay, I
And
hear
this
you.
is
I hear you.
I mean,
Karmany, go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
This is such a great point that you make, Suphachai, in terms of going ahead and planning for the very apparent future that we all know is coming. For me, it's like the never normal. We always hear in the news and broadcasts that as soon as we get back to normal, we're going to be doing X and Y. And for me, this is the normal. And I feel like society and businesses need to really engage themselves and immerse themselves in this level of uncomfort that COVID-19 has brought. Because this is the apparent future that we're all faced with. This level of uncomfort is going to be the kind of skill and the emotion that we need to harness solutions to tackle those SDGs that we're sitting with and facing with. And I think the more that we kind of harness this ability of being uncomfortable and looking for solutions in this uncomfortable environment, the closer we'll get to tackling some of those real concerns set within the SDG objectives.
Panel, I want to put some questions to you from our delegates. Let me just share this with you. This is from Sushil Raj. Hello, Sushil Raj. Thank you for being in the conference today. Sushil says, how do we bring in the voices of communities speaking about racial, economic, and social justice to reimagining our systems and build back better? What can businesses do in this regard to help change the system that is not working? All SDGs are interrelated, but which SDGs can be priority area of focus? Now, if anyone knows the SDGs, it's like, there can be no priority of focus. They're all, you have to do all of them all together, all of the time. You cannot pick your favorite ones. But this idea about racial, economic, social justice, who wants to go first? Philip, you mentioned George Floyd. Of course, he was the African-American who was killed by police a few weeks ago. You mentioned him. He has been mentioned in this conference. Why?
We need, first of all, we need a new social contract to achieve a just recovery. If there is no social contract, there will be no just recovery. And I like the point that the question made about how do you give recognition to these communities and voices? We have a fundamental problem in this world about the lack of respect for freedom of association and collective bargaining. If a union can't organize, if they can't breathe, if they can't negotiate, then how are we going to achieve equality, racial justice and fairness at the workplace? And we have a crisis. I call it, it's a kind of 80-20 rule that I've noticed in the compact. 80% of the businesses say they have a policy on the labour rights side, but only 18% of them are doing anything about it. And when you look across the board, some of these major companies score 0. I'm talking about Amazon and Apple and Intel, Walmart, McDonald's. Their labour rights performance is appalling. So therefore, there has to be an understanding that the union movement and those and communities need some respect and need some representation, and then we can build what I would say the contours of a just recovery. Labour rights, human rights in this world are in crisis. Therefore, the people dimension of the just recovery should mean in the Global Compact, every single employee in the Global Compact should have a living wage. Hopefully it'll be one of the calls coming out of this conference. Every company that is in receipt of government funding has to meet the conditionalities, those social conditionalities, that they will change the way that they will do their business. Now, I have other thoughts on what business should do, what government should do, and what the UN Global Compact should do. But the point is, a new deal, a new social contract. This model is bust. The business model is bust.
Clara, let me bring you back into the conversation here. Philip says this model is bust. And I know there's something that you have noticed that you're commenting about where we are right now in terms of the global pandemic is the vulnerability that it has revealed. Do you want to build on that just a little bit more? And in the context of what you do, explain what you mean by vulnerability. Philip says it's bust. You say vulnerability. I'm wondering if they're the same things.
Well, I think that today is really difficult to know what is the best way to start, the best point. I think also that we need a regeneration of the industrial and the social and the production. All our protocols, we have to change it, okay? So we have to think about to start from the basement, and today is a very good opportunity because we have the tool. The tool is the agenda, the tool is the SDGs, and I think that if we, in that moment, rethink and really take the agenda like the heart of our strategy, our business strategy, we can change some of the lines that we are not doing in a very correct way. So we have to think that we need 3 things. We need, of course, the social commitment in the private sector, as Philip said, social commitment in the private sector. This is the first one. The second one, we have to rethink about our protocol, how we produce our services, our product, how we do it. We need to do it in a sustainable way, so we have to change this kind of make products. It's very linked with the 12 principle. And the third one, also, we need to protect the ambience, the environment. But all of this is not possible if we don't have the fourth one. And the fourth one is a good governance, a very good governance that now I think that in all our countries, we need to rethink our governance.
What I'm hearing from you, panel, in all different kinds of ways is we need to just rethink. This is an attitude change. It's a mindset change that has happened because all of us have had to stop around the world. Our economies are shut down. Some of us are still in lockdown, and we're having to think, how do we achieve our goals? I have a couple of questions here from our audience. our delegates, and I'm going to start throwing them out to you and you can respond. This is Charles Watts. Hi, Charles. Thank you for being in the conference. Charles talks about regulation. He says, we need to reframe regulation to protect. Regulations are public protections. Companies that want less regulation are saying they want less public protections, which is unethical and corrupt. So reframing is social change. Who wants to take that? Who are the business people in this discussion? Mr. Suphachai, do you want to try that on regulations? Do you think regulations are going to help us or hinder us as we look forward to the next 10 years of development?
Thank you, Femi. It is, a great opportunity to make a lot of reform. Without the crisis or this pandemic crisis happening to us, maybe the private sector or the government sector, this is the time to actually transform and reform. So talk about regulations, any regulations that is going to help the recovery of the economy, create, jobs and lower the unemployment, and talking about the opportunities, educations, future workforce, all of these changes can happen now. And the government or the states, each of the governments should take this opportunity to push for the change. This is when every parties, including the people, are very open to change, be it private sectors and all across the industries. So I think it is about time, and it is a good time to push for all the reform and changes. Yes.
I think.
I have another. Yes, Philip, go ahead.
Yeah. I think Charles is on the right line. I think many governments have been held hostage by the private sector. Regulation bad, governance bad, and this crisis has shown the price paid by people because of this deregulation, this neoliberal argument which tries to diminish the role of the state. The answer from the people is they want strong government and they want stronger public services. I think what it's really about is the rules of the game, and voluntarism is not going to get us to the new place, to a just recovery. Therefore, I think it's crucial that we have a mandatory human rights due diligence legislation which applies throughout the UN system. We have a business and human rights, the so-called Ruggie principles. The European Union is going to be working on this. Other governments are thinking about this, that you have mandatory due diligence. Unless you change the regulations and the rules of the game, you're not going to get better behavior. We have to change the way business decisions are taken. And it all depends who's around the table. If you look at the representation of women in boards of directors, where are we? Where is the level of representation in business management? Where are we? And racial minorities and so forth. Can we have a regulation that all businesses pay their taxes, that the game of tax evasion and tax avoidance is over? And all this means we want businesses for the public good, for the common good. And that means a change in business purpose away from this kind of slavish adoration and kowtowing to this idea of shareholder value. Society is lost as a result. And I'm afraid to say we've been treated like lemons, and there's just a few of them drinking champagne out there, Femi. Thank you.
I am hearing some vocal comments from people. Go ahead, speak up.
Just building on Philip's discussion, I think I completely agree. And I almost want to urge industry from here on out. I've been in business and I've seen businesses always getting passionate behind that volume and net revenue number. And their business not achieve certain results by a certain quarter. You don't just sit back and, well, this is how this fiscal is going to end. Can I see an SDG value and an SDG target attached to business algorithm for net revenue, volume share, and SDG? And I want to see passion and units and teams mobilized when those SDG numbers aren't being achieved each quarter. And I want people within business to get angry and put efforts behind it to make sure that it happens, just as they would behind net revenue. And that for me is when we're going to see real change behind achieving the goals that we need to do.
This is spooky. It's almost as if
Good
the
point.
delegates are on the same wavelength as you are. Let me share this with you. This is from Hazel James. Hazel James is one of our delegates today. Question for the panel. Capital letters, yelling it out at all of you. Do we need a global public whistleblowing platform that names and shames companies whose activities go against the SDGs? A platform that all members of the public can contribute to. Reputation could be a key lever in driving change. It's almost like the SDG police force out there. Clara, your thoughts about that? Somebody out there telling you if you weren't doing the right thing as far as the SDGs are concerned, you are in trouble. The public is watching you. Clara, is that workable?
Okay, I think that could be great if all of the companies are able to make our best effort so we can show how we are doing that. From the small ones to the biggest ones, all of us have to be do a good disclosure about how we want to change that. So I think that should be great if we can show to the rest of the people how we can progress little by little because we have our KPIs, and then we need to show how we can get a little bit more every day, every month. I think that it's very, very important.
Good idea, Hazel. You combine that with workplace, with a voice for workers in the workplace, where they can talk about their health and safety concerns, their wage concerns, their job security concerns, then we can get somewhere.
Mr. Suphachai, what were you going to say?
I would like to. Yes, I was going to say that I do not. I'm a believer in love and compassion than creating hatred. That could come, with a lot of fighting to each other, and more towards education, and more towards creating awareness. In fact, I agree in principle that all the private sectors should actually report it, their goals on the zero waste, neutral carbon footprint, human rights, etc. I agree with that, and it should be the positive reinforcement. There could be some negative reinforcement, but the positive reinforcement is almost like raising our own children. Whether we'll explain the logic to them, with reasons, or we just use a stick. So I agree in principle that all private sector should make the reports, and all the stock exchange around the world should actually give their recognitions to these issues of sustainability, the same as they are giving the importance to the issue of governance, for example.
I'm just going to remind everybody, if you're just joining our conversation, welcome to the Leaders Summit, the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit. It is virtual, which means that all of our interactions over the next 26 hours, 25 hours now, will be virtual. This is our virtual panel. What we are looking at is, where are we right now with COVID-19? And as businesses who care about the development of our societies, of the world, if we're trying to stay on track for the SDGs for 2030, what do we need to do? How do we take this opportunity and then actually build better, build stronger, build together, which is a theme that you will hear a lot of today. So, panel, I'm going to get you to think about your roadmap. What is on your roadmap? Be practical. I hear the big thoughts. I hear the big ideas. I'm trying to work out how you're going to achieve that. I want to hear that in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. Let me do this via Guillaume or Hunt. And Guillaume says, what management tools and processes are CEOs implementing today? Have they got the solutions for sustainability? Clara, do you want to start with that? What tools are you able to use? Have you seen being used?
Can you
As a
repeat? I can hear now.
Yes, of course. What management tools, what management processes are you using? Can you see being used? Can you suggest being used to get us back on track with the SDGs for the next 10 years in business?
Okay, yeah. Well, and as a small company, don't have so much resources, but we make like a road book, and we try to tick every 6 months something as better as possible. We started redesigning all our protocols of manufacturing, okay, so we can save and do like an circular economy as much as possible, and then we have some uh, indicators in order to get an advance everything 4 months so we can check it. Okay, that's why the second one for us is very, very important, is the training of our staff. We did a personal career for each one of our employees 3 years ago, so we can check how they are improving their skills, their capabilities, because we know that at least it's 3-4 months, there are new skills that they can get. So they can improve even the category of the labor, so they can improve the income. So it's very important, the third one. And the fourth, doing to our stakeholders, we want to get more knowledge about what means sustainability, okay? Because we can go alone during this way. So we need that everyone that is involved in our environment, our ecosystem of our company, know how we proceed and how we think about a business strategy based on sustainability for the near future.
Karmany, you are urging us to think big, to think the same energy that we're using right now for COVID-19, use that energy to get the SDGs done. So you bring that vibrancy. But what about actual processes or tools? What do you have? What
For
have you
me,
seen?
processes, I mean, we've up until now addressed global leaders, we've called on CEOs, we've called on sector and industry to make these changes. But for me, it goes beyond this. So one, from a company perspective, we've put into place measures, and I know the earlier question was, which ones do we choose, which ones do we leave behind from an SDG perspective?
Hello.
I do think
Karmany, carry on.
it's mindful for us to
Carry on.
actually...
There's a little voice saying hello to you. Do not worry, it is not a little voice in your head. We all hear it. Continue anyway. Go ahead, Karmany. Sorry about that.
That is fantastic news. That is fantastic news that everyone's hearing it besides me. So as I was saying, it is important for businesses to be mindful, and that's something that Distell's done well in terms of selecting where they actually make the bigger impact on the SDGs. So we've chosen a few to focus on, and we're focusing on sub-objectives within those SDGs to focus on and bring those to life within a period of time. And all our brands and our business operations are aligned to the SDGs that we've chosen, and the focus areas and the objectives that we've chosen within it, and against measurable indicators within that for South Africa or the markets that we trade on. But more so, to my earlier point, outside of just business and reaching out to CEO and governments, having a career early on in marketing, it always fathomed me how consumers don't realize the amount of power that they have in driving global change. If we look at every brand, every business operation, these rely quite heavily on consumer trends. And we're seeing that more and more, where consumers are becoming more mindful in terms of how they're consuming, where they're consuming from, and the businesses behind the products that they buy off shelves. And I think this kind of pester power from consumers is actually going to be that change agent we need to see, where businesses are going to be mobilized. And if businesses don't and want to go back to the comfort of their profit and loss statement, they're actually going to miss an opportunity of being at the forefront of this dynamism and change globally. Secondly, for me, is students. So we see that across industry, you only have sustainability departments that actually focus on it. But I think students coming into the workplace and millennials coming into the workplace have a responsibility and a need to educate themselves on what it is. And they can do two things. So one is to be mindful on the organization that you choose to work for and make sure that it's a business with purpose. And I think if you're working for a business with purpose, automatically that kind of filters into anything that you do within it. And the kind of task that you do is not the job of the sustainability office, but the job from everyone, from the person that's cleaning the floors to the person that's making strategic decisions on board levels. And question, for me, knowing the in-depth indicators behind the SDGs is absolute imperative for anyone working in an organization to know about. And I think newcomers into the workforce have an advantage to familiarize themselves with these objectives and start questioning businesses and strategic thinking against these objectives in terms of where it was. A simple question. I was listening to a Melinda Gates.
Yeah, go ahead, Karmany. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Karmany.
I was listening
I have
to
a question that I want to put to you, but finish your story. Go ahead.
Okay. Absolutely. And one of the things that struck out to me, and I've been actually ignorant of this in my frame of mind, is female empowerment and having a female voice at the table in aid of achieving the gender equality targets. But looking at it, it's not just having the title, having the seat at the table. It's actually having female empowerment at the forefront of making strategic decisions for business, government, or any other sector that we're looking at. And knowing that kind of level of detail that it takes to actually unpack the SDG is imperative. And this talks to everything from climate action to gender equality to responsible consumption. It's knowing the detail behind it, so those actions are actually against making a change.
Right. Okay. So I see Philip, and Philip, I want you to sit tight. Don't go wandering around. I hear you. I see you. We hear you. We see you. We have a question for you as well. All right. So I'm gonna put that to you in a moment. But because Karmany brought up women and gender empowerment and women in positions that are important positions, Clara, I've got to bring you in here because gender is something that you can speak very clearly about. Go ahead. Has that changed? Has that momentum changed in terms of getting women in positions of power now that we're in a crisis that's a health crisis in the world?
Well, every time that we have a crisis, a woman gender is going to step forward. Sorry. Now we have to increase this support that we give to women associations, for women, for our girls at the schools. We have to push them a little bit more because every time that we have a crisis, then we go to a step back. So we don't have to hesitate. It's time to accelerate this push for our women, even our girls. So we have to think that in the best way in order to power the woman are education and training. It's very important women to get new training to elevate, to up their level in order to make other jobs. It's very important that training, education must be something that we have to offer as much as possible to any kind of woman around the world, because it's the only way that we can reinforce them and make that sure that they have other opportunities, better opportunities to increase their way of living.
I'm going to bring in Irene Sims' question. Irene has a question exactly for you, Philip. So she says, Philip Jennings,
Okay.
who or which country or countries or institutions can lead and enforce this redrafting on the social compact? You have said it is broken. We need a new one. Who will lead that?
Well, I think first of all, we have to influence those institutions that have influence out there. So we've been persevering at the G20 and the G7 to try and get this message across about what a social compact should be all about. We have been hammering away at the IMF and the World Bank to try and get a new message across about what a social contract looks like there. We've been working at the OECD to try and get the message across there, the International Labour Office and elsewhere. And also in the national context, one of the lessons I hope that all governments everywhere will learn, that those who have come through this crisis best have listened to their workers, had dialogues with their labour movement and civil society, respected them, relied on them for advice, and better systems of. Clearly, there are examples in the Nordic countries where we always tend to use as an example. But the fact of the matter is, having that voice and having that seat is important as those institutions. And also, as lockdown ends, that there will be a new momentum emerging. The Fridays for Future movement will start marching again. Workers will start marching again. And to this will be climate change, social justice, and peace. So also, please, the business community is well organized. They're always telling us about the millions of organizations that they represent in chambers of commerce. They also have to get a message about, and they should not tolerate what we see. I think when we look at the stats, chief executive officers are not putting the SDGs to their boards. They're not putting the 10 principles to their boards. And if they're not putting to them boards, then the board is silent, maybe ignorant, or maybe they prefer it that way. I think it's really important that CEOs embed this. Secondly, you asked for practical action, supply chains. Every CEO that has a supply chain has to undertake a due diligence operation to make sure there are no adverse consequences on human rights. We know from our experience in Bangladesh, and when I was back at uni, we had the Bangladesh Accord, which is still there. The company said, no way can we have a legally binding agreement. What's happened? We had 250 companies signed up, a legally binding agreement, and behavior changed. And finally, global agreements between the workforce and the company to ensure that basic rights are respected. The people are demanding this. 9 out of 10 people in the States said it's time for business to press the reset button. We ain't going to get there with Mr. Trump. Now, I know I don't show how political we can get. I hope that the American public can change this guy and then begin a new conversation about what the American dream is all about.
Philip, you know, at the United Nations, we don't pick out individual countries. We work together, better, stronger for recovery. So that was a cheeky little insert there, but obviously you were speaking for yourself and not for everybody else. But I hear you. Also, many people are listening and watching the panel and appreciating your panel. Let me give you some love. Matu Stasiak, Philip Jennings is hitting the spot at the plenary. And then some more complicated questions. And this is really about the informal economy and daily wage earners and how they can have a sustainable income, a sustainable life, work in a pandemic situation. Mr. Suphachai, let me ask you first, and then I'm going to go to Karmany, who is based in South Africa, so she understands this informal economy, which is slightly trickier. Mr. Suphachai, you start first. You said you've kept jobs, so maybe that is one way that the companies have held on to their employees and continued to pay them. Tell us more.
Again, for as a CEO of the company, first of all, you have to recognize in the bigger picture of what really is the cost of your business. And the costs come from a direct cost, you can see very clearly, but also the costs that come from social unrest, come from the instabilities, political instabilities, come from the environmental issues, and therefore you also take responsibilities for the job security. In fact, I think that one of the way to get the private sectors to kind of aware and undertake this part of the responsibilities is how the private sector actually continue to train their workforce and to upskill and reskill their workforce. And not only that, the private sector should actually not only comply to just the existing law on, say, how you compensate the employees if they leave their job or they have to leave their job. But in fact, the private sector that would lay off people, okay, they actually have to take up more of their responsibilities, seeing through that those people actually can find a new job and also with the right skill sets. So private sectors would become also in itself an institution whereby giving education and training to really also really see through that where those employees who you could be viewed as the students of the institutions, right?
Yes.
Pursue their next career.
So, Mr.
So this is the
Suphachai,
part
if
that we should be.
Mr. Suphachai, if I may, thank you. You've given us lots of ideas. Kami, I'm just going to ask you very briefly to respond to this idea about the informal economy and how it's sustainable at this time. Literally very briefly, because we're at the end of this panel. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, South Africa's economy is very much reliant on the informal sector. And unfortunately, with the pandemic that we're faced with, it's been the hardest hit. And it's very difficult for government to inform the right decisions that allows both private, formal and informal sector to thrive in these kind of economic circumstances. What we need to see, and from an SDG perspective, is one, enabling these businesses to recognize the need for sustainable business practices. And I think that's going to come through both policy, government intervention, as well as the private sector and formal sector helping out and supporting these informal trades.
All right. So, panel, I cannot believe that the time has flown so fast. And delegates, your questions are extraordinary. Thank you. They're so good. I mean, I could have just done your questions and it would have been a way smarter panel. I appreciate them. Thank you. Do not stop. We've got another 24 hours of this conference to go. I need you to stay with us. But what I want to do, which is very, very, very important, is I want to know in 30 seconds, each panelist, and I mean 30 seconds, which is basically a sentence, how are you leading at this time? How are you leading by example? So we do not only stay on track for the SDGs for business, but also fly ahead of where we would have been anyway. How are you leading, Clara, in a sentence?
Working, 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 working. Working.
That was a fantastic sentence. Mr. Suphachai.
Working.
Yes, I think this is the time
how
we
are you
show
leading?
Yes, it is the time we show our children, okay, that the very basics of our existence is actually to help each other and to take care of each other. So that's how we should lead, including in the company as well.
With warmth, gentleness, kindness. Good way to lead. Philip, how are you leading at this time?
Well, I was just beforehand, I was listening to Sam Cooke's song. It came on the radio, change is going to come. And he said it's been a long, long time coming, but I know change is going to come. My job, because I'm now president of the International Peace Movement, but still have my connections with the world of labor, is that the time is here. And it's a time to raise our voice, to protest, to demand change, to take to the streets, and not to be fearful. We have to be liberated from fear and to show that there's an alternative. and then we can get things done. We lead by example, we lead with our policies, and at the end of the day, if we lead, have this spirit, have this desire, we build a momentum and we build a future that we'd like to see.
It wasn't singing, but I think Sam Cooke would be impressed. Karmany, I'm going to leave it with the voice of the youth, the voice of the future. How are you leading in a sentence at this time?
For me, it's to embrace being uncomfortable. And with that discomfort, start raising my voice for change, be it in the organization that I work with, be it among my extended community of a network and colleagues and friends, and start really making SDGs a part of the conversation and part of the discussion, and get people up in arms about it and get angry about it and start doing something in their big or small capacity. I think we all have the power for change if we just believe we can.
Good job.
Panel,
Very good.
you were inspiring. Thank you very much for spending the last hour with us at the Leaders Summit, the Virtual Leaders Summit for the UN Global Compact 2020. I will now release you. Thank you very much indeed. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.